So there's a really good chance you're watching this on video. So maybe we should talk a little bit about video because it is absolutely necessary these days. There's no way to avoid it. I'm going to admit something. Not 2 hours ago, I started playing with CapCut. So y'all are in trouble now. Y'all are in trouble now. It's going to be nothing but animations and transitions. It's going to be fantastic. You should all be terrified. But that's the thing. Video is so very now and you have to get involved with it. However, there are only about a million ways to do it poorly. And we'd like to help you avoid most of them if we can, if not all of them. So today we're going to talk about how do you build a video strategy? Not a video. We're not talking about technology. We're not complaining about our mics or our cameras or our headphones. We're talking about how to build a video strategy, because with a strategy, whatever technology, whatever platforms, whatever you use to build video, your answer, your outcomes, your value will be way, way higher. See you in a minute.
One gave up coffee and the other just got off 2 7-hour plane rides. And they both have faces for radio. So why are they talking about video strategy? This one's a doozy, folks. To get the full strategy building guide, subscribe for free to peoplemba.com. This episode is brought to you by Job Pixel. You've reached the People MBA. We're out shopping for our new global headquarters, so go ahead and talk after the beep.
Hey, James. Hey, Bryan. Mia here. Quick question around video content strategy. We're building out our employer brand, and obviously I'm always interested in attracting more talent to the energy sector, and I need some help around video content. What works? What doesn't work? How do I actually speak to the people I'm trying to attract? Looking forward to your insights. Talk soon.
All right, so it's time to talk about video. We've got in the downloads an entire document. It's a big document. It's a good-sized document with lots of good questions and lots of leading questions to help you define your own video strategy. This episode and this download is brought to you by Job Pixel. Thank you so much, Job Pixel, for bringing this to everybody. I know that a lot of people, especially in the recruiting, TA, employer brand space, when they think video, they go, ooh, that's a really good idea. And then they go, oh crap, what do I do? How do I do it? How do I make it happen? And that's what today is all about. Bryan, tell me, what is your experience with video? When has video really worked for you? You got any good video stories, either wins or not so wins?
Ooh, remember that time where we started recording a video where I was 90 minutes off a transatlantic flight and I looked like I'm dead? Remember that one? Oh my God.
It seems so long ago. Yes. Folks, we are recording this literally a day after seeing each other in TA week, hanging out and doing some stuff. So if this isn't a punchy episode, you're welcome.
But, video is, I feel like it's been growing in importance for like how many years. And now I think it's finally reached a place where it's the default. I would argue that it's now taken over the 600-word blog as it's the foundational aspect of everybody's content calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. YouTube is the #1 podcast channel for those of you who are not aware, and which chances are you're listening to us or watching us on that channel exactly. And that's why we started this project on video first and figured out how to migrate it to other places. Video is so central. So let's start with the central question. You're a TA leader, you're an employer brand leader, you're a whoever, recruitment marketer, and you need to get into video. What are some things we should be starting to think about to make sure we're staying on the right path, that we're achieving the outcomes we want, and we're not just wasting our time, energy, and money? Because Lord knows when it comes to video, it is an absolute time, energy, and money suck. It will destroy you if you don't avoid it.
Yeah. So, I mean, from experience of making films with very big budgets, I can tell you that the more attention to detail and the more time you put into the planning to get the strategy right, you will save significant exponential budget when it comes to shoot. And so it goes back to any good strategy, really, James, isn't it? It's about understanding what does success look like, who's the audience, what does high value look like, and designing an approach that's just really smart and feasible and achievable and within your budget. And it always comes down to the more insight you have about your audience, the more interesting you can make the content, the more high value you can make it so it resonates and people come back for more.
Yeah, there's a really funny story about Alfred Hitchcock that he was worried about his producers mucking up his movie. And so what he did is he prepared exact shots. There was not coverage shots. There's not, let's just shoot an extra one just to see, or what about if it comes in from that way? He did not mess around. He shot exactly what he needed so that there was nothing that the producers could do to say, what if we swap this around? Or what if we added this? Because there was no this to add. So planning is critical. And to your point, look, the world is filled with generic videos. It's such a common thing. There actually, if you go to YouTube and Google generic employer brand video or a generic recruitment video, there are many people making fun of generic employer brand and recruitment videos. And they are right to do so because most of them are crap. Most of them are such, I joke if I had $1 for every time I saw an employer brand video or a hero video on a career site that started with that 45-minute slow fade in, music swells, camera pans across, pictures on a cork board of old people who used to work there, leadership, the leader on a desk but made of a chair or a table or whatever, and then it takes 45 seconds or 60 seconds before anybody says anything of value. Oh my God, I'd be a rich person if I could have $1 for every one of those. It's not doing, but it's so expected these days. It's unfortunate.
Well, I think it's a mindset thing. We've all grown up watching feature film, and when you talk about video, it seems like a big thing. So it's almost like we need a mindset shift. And the sort of counter argument to the strategic planning and taking it seriously and meticulously understanding what success looks like. The counter to that is also turn the camera on and start filming some, because we should release a bloopers reel. The amount of times, that we muck it up and just crack on, even the progression of our own stuff here, you can see over time it gets better. The key thing is starting, and, it's so accessible these days. The kit is cheap, if you have a decent relationship with employees or whatever, the cast is almost free, so there's no excuse not to do this anymore other than not knowing what questions to ask or what to shoot and how to go about it, which is why video content strategy is so important.
Yeah, and so we talk about strategy. We're not saying, okay, build the perfect video. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do you go from point A to point Z, where Z is exactly where you want to be, but that arc, that journey can be years. And it may start with step one, capture as much authentic, and I apologize for using the buzzword, but authentic footage of you talking to employees with your phone. Even before you've got a mic, let's be fair, at this point, cameras have pretty good, the phones have pretty good mics, and the software that you use to edit videos has really good filtering. So you don't need a fancy mic necessarily just to get started. And in starting, you learn, what happens when I record stuff? How come here's a good one. When I first started, I would just turn on the camera and say, I'm going to ask you a question, and just stare at them. And they would stare at the camera and go, okay, so I really like to work here. And I would get that a lot. I'm going, okay, I need to get them acclimated because I've met them and they're smart and they're funny and they're clever and they're fast. And I don't know who the hell that person is on the camera. But when I turn that camera on, like their personality drains away. Like I pulled the tub on the drain on the tub. It's got to be, how do you acclimate? And that was the first lesson I learned, was how do I get people comfortable? And to me, it was about, hey, and for anybody who's recorded a video with me, they know this joke. Okay, I'm going to start with the hardest question. Who are you? What do you do? And they laugh and they start to get comfortable and they tell me, and I may or may not use that footage. And then I ask another question just to get them comfortable. I may ask them 3 questions before I even get to anything of value that I know I'm going to keep, just to get them comfortable. That is strategy. Understanding what it's going to take to go from here to here starts with what's working, what's not working, what do I need to do, what do I need to change in myself and my approach and what I'm asking for, and having the critical eye to say, what we shot wasn't good enough. It's not useful. What did we do wrong? How can we change it? How can we go back again?
Yeah, learning from every time you do it. I think it's like anything else, doesn't it? We
1000%.
I would typically send some questions ahead of time so people can come prepared. Now, what typically happens is they verbatim learn some answers to those questions.
Yeah.
But they turn up and it's almost like a shield. It's like they have some confidence that they wouldn't have had otherwise because they feel somewhat prepared. Now, what I also find is you ask them one question that resembles something off the list. They start off fairly confidently or whatever. And to your point, you might not even start recording the first one because it's going to be garbage.
Total trash.
But then at some point you get them into a state of flow where they feel comfortable, and you remind them actually they're talking about their favorite subject, like them and their own lives and that kind of stuff. So it's just about making them comfortable. And I also find that the most interesting answers are not the first question. It's always the follow-up question. Oh, tell me a little bit more about that. And one thing that I learned from Chris Voss,
oh yeah, I love Chris. Yeah. Never Split. The book is Never Split the Difference. He's a former FBI negotiator. You don't even have to read the book. If you listen to any of his podcasts, you get the gist, and you'll fall kind of in love with that weirdo. He is a great weirdo.
He really is one of the best. But a little trick that I learned from him is just repeat the last 3 words that somebody says, and then they just say more. They dig in and give you more information. So, understanding how to make people comfortable and just get them started in front of a camera is probably, one of the most important aspects. And then you're going to find, out of 10 minutes of shooting, you might get 1 minute of gold, and that's okay.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a great ratio, frankly. I mean, I go for 20, 30-minute shoots to try and get 2-3 minutes maybe. And even then you're not so sure. There's the joke, the Columbo joke, for anybody who's old enough to remember this TV show Columbo from the 70s and 80s. He asks you questions, but he knows the answers. He's just softening you up, and he glows to leave. He's like, okay, well, I got everything I need. Thanks so much. And the criminal thinks, aha, I got away with it. And he goes to the doorknob and goes, one more thing. And he asks you the question that he really cares about. Honestly, if I say, hey, I just got one more question, we're all done. You've been great. This has been fantastic. Let me just ask one more question. And I know that's going to be the winner. I know that's going to be the gold, because that's what I'm really asking for, because they're starting to lower their defenses. And if they know they're at the home stretch, they're almost at the end, they're almost done, they've been doing a good job, they're much more relaxed and much more open. But this isn't a class on how to trick people into sounding better on camera. Because frankly, if that was a class, should we be the ones to tell it? Look at us. We are not exactly the poster children for killing it on camera some days.
It's debatable. Yeah,
it really is. It really is. Let's talk about, so if we're talking about strategy, I want to remind everybody that the answer is rarely a video. You need to not think about what is the perfect clip, what is the perfect video, what is the perfect thing, but more about what is the perfect series of things. Video is very much about series and campaigns and flows of information. If we were 10 years ago, YouTube was very much I'm going to go watch that video, done. It is such a social media platform. People engage on it. They look at the next video. They want to see what happens after that. They want to subscribe to you. That's where you want them to be. So if you think about one video, you're really kind of boxing yourself in and when you box yourself in like this, invariably you're jamming every potential story point into one box, and it's a pretty full box. And that's why it ends up being generic.
Well, it also puts a lot of pressure to nail that one subject into one video, which never happens. But what I love about this idea of series, I've been talking about the same thing for so many years. It also gives you so many practical benefits and opportunities, because you get the familiarity of a format. You get the confidence of a theme that may or may not be directly from your employer brand, or something that one of your talent personas really cares about. You then get the efficiency of understanding what you're looking for, knowing what questions really resonate and that kind of stuff. And the audience gets used to a format and starts to like it. It makes you want to watch the next one if you've cracked the formula. So it can be cheaper, more efficient, easier to produce, and all of those things. But if you then brainstorm a topic, you'll come up with lots of different questions so you can mix it up, but then it is on a theme and you're doubling down on something that your organization stands for, that you need to accentuate. So it really is a great strategy to figure out what are the themes, what are the purpose of the video series in the first place, and then you can start to get creative about all the different angles of attack then, looking at it from different perspectives, because let's just say it was about resilience and what it takes to contribute to a team inside your organization. You can ask the same 3 questions to different people all over the organization, and they'll say different things.
Very.
Hopefully there'll be some red thread and some sort of, continuity between some of the answers. But amongst the different language that they used and the different thoughts and all the rest of it, then people can identify with some of those things. So I love that type of approach. And it can take care of a content calendar in no time. It's much easier Isn't it? You know, because then it's much easier approaching it that way than looking at a blank page, coming up with an idea for one video and then go, well, what next? Like, what do we want to do? You know, a series on career development, a series on personal growth, a series on how it feels to belong, or, you know, I'm sure you'll rattle off a number of themes that you could just pull off the shelf that would serve any organization really well.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like about video is that it's weirdly self-contained, right? A blog post, you're sending a link and you hope they click on it and you hope they kind of scan it and read it and do stuff. You know, a tweet, you're hoping they go to another platform and they're reading stuff and it doesn't move very well. A video, whether it's on YouTube or a file on your computer, is incredibly portable and it's got its own packaging. So you can say, hey, instead of saying, well, let's make one video about resilience, and let's take your theme because it's a great theme. Instead of saying one video about resilience, we talk to 4 people in the organization. Now that video has to stand for resilience for everybody in every team, every function, every level, every office, whatever. That's a big ask. But if you do 10 videos across all the different teams and functions about resilience, you're going to get a lot of micro videos. And that means you're going to be able to say, okay, I'm about to talk to a developer and I want to talk to them about resilience. I have the exact video that is a developer talking about resilience. Perfect. Instead of saying, here's a video and a developer doesn't talk about it, but you can get the gist, right? It doesn't build credibility, but it's super well packaged. So you can throw that video on TikTok and YouTube and LinkedIn and. You can use it in emails. You can use it in all sorts of things. And because it's self-contained, it's easy to share. You can pass it around. You can give it to recruiters. You can give it to hiring managers. The other part about a series is that it has, to the content calendar situation, you have one video a week. Let's say you do 5 videos on resilience a week. What's video number 6? A montage. You take that same footage, chop it up, shuffle it like a deck of cards, and bang, you get a whole new piece of content. It's exactly the same stuff, but very little extra content. Yeah. That is the power of video. Because it's self-contained, it slices and dices just like, ingredients in a stew. You can use them in lots of different ways. They can get moved around a lot of different places. They can live on lots of different platforms. One video, if you don't use it 5 or 6 different ways, you are absolutely wasting the value of that video.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can literally chop that up and use it in so many different ways. You're absolutely right. Part of what we've talked about today kind of assumes that a video is just about questions and answers and quite straight, sort of direct.
But that's the easiest way to start usually, right? That's a great kind of training wheels.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's exactly the point I was going to make. It's a great place to start to get your confidence up and also get not just yourself, but other people around you used to the fact that we do video, Yeah. But when you start to get creative with, okay, we need to communicate these things, these insights, this information to our audience. But actually, we also need to get their attention and create affinity with them as well. How do we do that? Now, if it's an external audience and you're trying to generate more candidate interest, put yourself in their shoes. You could now take a recruiter and say, look, you speak to these people all day long. Tell us the 5 most common attributes of somebody who gets a job here. Like,
oh, wow. Yeah, that's great.
So now it's like, I'm going to tell you some secrets that all of our successful candidates do naturally that you can do as well. If you're interested in a job here, here's the 5 things you need to do. Like, if you're interested at all remotely about that organization, you're going to click to see what the 5 things are. Or you might just want to be, intrigued enough to go, well, I wonder what the 5 attributes are generally, because it's going to help me in my pursuit of a job anyway, Yeah. So thinking creatively about what's the most important value for the audience and how can I pique their interest from a creative perspective? I would say that's the next step on the strategic ladder. Would you agree, or is there something else?
Yeah, I think, and that's a kind of storytelling. It's more than a, hey, what do you like about this company? Or, hey, tell me, just do this thing. And it's back and forth. And you end up usually either including yourself or cutting yourself out, like I always do. The next step is, can you tell me a more complete story, and giving them a framework of, hey, what are the 3 things, the 5 things that do this? Tell me about a time in which you were surprised by what happened. Tell me about it. And you can steal from the brand document. Oh, if we're all talking about resilience, tell me about a time in which you saw someone really push themselves and have the resilience to do something amazing, or a time you did that. The steps help you grow and help you tell better stories, because a question and answer tends to be tight. It tends to be short answers. You get 30-second, minute-long videos, and you can have just their face for a minute or 2. No big deal. Once they start telling a story, that allows you to kind of, flex your muscles a bit and say, oh, okay, if we're going to answer what are the 5 things I see in every successful candidate, throw in numbers to show, okay, this is answer number 1. This is point number 2. This is point number 3. Start to throw in B-roll, which is footage of not of your subject. It is the office. It's I always like detail B-roll, like what's their hand doing when they're doing it, or you have a close-up from the other side, like that, all sorts of different ways to do B-roll. But that's when you start to say, oh, wow, we can really start to not just answer a question, which is a very transactional way of doing things, but really providing information and then surrounding that information with further proof points. Video, because it is audio and video, it is so many different sensory kind of inputs. You really have lots of opportunities to push and say, this is, really what we want you to believe.
This is the space where we could have put an ad, but we didn't. If you're enjoying this conversation, subscribe to the People MBA, either on YouTube or your podcast player. All downloads are available at peoplemba.com. If you're getting something useful out of it, tell someone. They might even thank you.
Let me ask you, because I'm going to try, I don't know how to get beyond this step because I'm a one-man video person and this stuff is where I live. What's next? How do you go to big? What are some, kind of secondary steps before you get to, okay, we're going to bring in Chris Nolan and he's going to shoot for 3 years inside our office and it's going to be 14 different time twists and whatever it is. And, Leonardo DiCaprio will play the CEO or whatever the hell it is. How do you get, what is the next kind of video step up?
So I think you need I think of it in like different gears. I think you need a small flywheel gear, I'll give you an example of that, and a bigger flywheel gear to be working on over time that might take. So if you track a project, an interesting project is starting and it's a 6-month project, and you could film that team for 10 minutes a week for 6 months and edit that together.
And each one is its own video.
Yeah.
Each one, like one every week. You're filling that calendar, but you're moving towards a big idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at the end of it, you've got the bigger edit. So you go back to your content and edit something together, which is a little bit meatier and maybe it's a little content that you held back. And, so you could live off that for 12 months. And that's like a really nice way to get some micro content and a longer arching story that people will take notice of. The other one is a repeatable format, and it can be this could be how you get viral or how people doom scroll through all of your content. And I'll give you a great example of this. I saw a thing on TikTok a couple of weeks ago, and it consumed about half an hour of my time. And it was, I swear, it's like a little insight into my side life.
That's never happened to me. Never happened. Never happened. I don't know what you're talking about.
So this was the channel from a zero start. All it was a film crew of 3 people get into a New York cab and they say to the cab driver, where is your favorite restaurant? Take us there. Leave the meter running. We're going to take you in. We're going to buy you a meal and experience your favorite meal. And so we pay for the trip and we see the restaurants and all the rest of it. And on the way, the cabbie opens up and all the rest of it. And then you go on to the next one, different cab driver, different restaurant, the meter's running. They cost, relatively like a few $100, but it's just so interesting. It's a repeatable format. The reason you go to the next one is because you know exactly what's coming and it's interesting. It's got you hooked. Imagine that was... let's just say it was an organization in Manhattan and you're David versus Goliath, you're competing against your Googles and this, that, and the other and all the rest of it. And you also want to show up on GPTs, instead of just an SEO strategy. What if it's a recruiter randomly goes up to somebody in the office and says, where'd you go for lunch? I want to buy you lunch and have a quick chat. And they take you and show you a hidden lunch spot near the office, and you get a little bit of an insight into that person, so you hear about their story, you buy them lunch, you get to see where it is. A repeatable format like that could just spark interest with a micro slice of your talent audience, but maybe that's all you need, and that's just off the top of my head. Like there's lots of repeatable formats.
Yeah, and I love that for 2 big reasons. The first of which, the brain is all about looking for differences. If you give something that is 98% the same, meaning the structure, the format, and here's the difference. Today it's this guy going to that hot dog place. This time it's this girl going to this sushi place. Those minor differences make the brain fire like crazy. 2, it's really about this, and this is where I want to kind of have a big flashing red light where it really says, hey, recruiters, when I get on my soapbox and say the we're hiring content doesn't work, this is the content I'm talking about. Real slices of life, real people, the stuff that if you were scrolling on YouTube or scrolling on whatever and you stopped and went, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's the idea. That's the plan. You're not trying to talk to people who are just on the job boards looking to figure out which job to do. They're really influencing people to understand this is what we think about. This is how we work. This is who we are. It's an incredible human authentic experience. It's a credible snapshot of what's really going on in these people. And you'll build these micro relationships with strangers that will lead to deeper influence across the network. That's the stuff that gets shared. That's the stuff that gets talked about. And if you build that content, and it is not mentioned in at least half of your interviews, I will pay you money. Like that's the kind of content that once someone sees it, we were at TA Week and Design Pickle showed us their crazy video for people who just applied. And it was a crazy video. It does involve a dude in a pickle suit with a bikini. I will say nothing further. Oh no, I will. There's rapping. And right there, I've painted a picture, but they say 80 to 90% of people who see that video, who are on the interview, talk about that video. And I'm like, that's the kind of content that sticks in people's heads.
And that should be where the quality bar is really. And, it doesn't matter whether that is BBC broadcast standard or shot with the iPhone. Like it's the thinking and the level of detail you go into. And if you put the thought into these things, especially with repeatable format, all of the smart thinking is done up front. And then the execution is super, super easy. Yeah. So here's one for you then, James, because you could put all of this thinking in, you could meticulously plan a content calendar, have some great ideas and all the rest of it. But if the employees or the people you engage with are always saying only nice things, and it's all it's wonderful, it's rainbows, it's sunshine, it's unicorns, then I don't care what you say. It comes across as I don't believe it's bullshit.
Absolutely.
How do you ensure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, it's like running across a company with a lot of people with a 5-star review on Glassdoor. You go, cult. Anyway, that is its own series of red flags. Look, when you're talking, and this is the power of video, because it's not perfectly scripted. It's not a commercial where every single pixel and every single frame is meticulous. It's not a David Fincher movie, right? Fincher is famous for taking 100 shots because one of the extras in the background did a funny thing with his elbow. He's like, what? That's incredibly distracting. We got to do it again. Like he is so precise in his way of approaching that. You should not be, because the plan is not to deliver some perfectly precise message. The goal is to pull open the curtain and show what's really going on. And video is incredibly powerful. You look at a scripted video, and even if it's a scripted video where someone is saying the thing their legal said they're supposed to say, but in the background, stuff is happening. You can't control that. In fact, that's the stuff I'm like kind of absorbing. Sometimes, in a conscious way, and sometimes in a subconscious way. It's teaching me about the company. And in fact, the fact that you're scripted is teaching me about the company too, but that's a separate conversation. But you're really showing, and no matter what you're showing, if it's a series of desks, one of them is going to be messy, and one of them is going to have nothing on it, and one of them is going to have a couple of pictures of somebody's dog or somebody's kids or somebody's spouse or whatever, or it's nothing but Lego figurines of Transform. Like that. What does that say to me? I don't know, but it's adding information to my brain about what I'm perceiving. The video, it's an aperture that opens really, really wide, and you're pulling all these details, and it's shaping the message. So if you have the talking head or the person who is scripted saying, this is a place where everybody can be everybody, and you pan to the desks and they're all kind of the same. But if you pan to the desks and they are truly very different, okay, you're giving me some proof, but you're also showing me what is the level, what is the extent to which different is appreciated and valued. So it's very much about creating proof points rather than just telling and shouting a story.
Yeah, it's such a good point. That makes me think of, I'd love to interview somebody, and then it's almost like two truths and a lie. It's like, okay, we're going to interview 3 people and then show you 3 desks, like whose desk is who, match the personality, or come up with something creatively to create a daisy chain of content, What comes to mind there is a video of gratitude. And gratitude is probably one of the most powerful currencies of advocacy and employee engagement, in my view, because you can say to somebody, what are the top 3 qualities that you admire in the team around you? What they're really telling you is what it's like, but in a slightly different way. And also, usually, it's a reflection of what they think.
Yes,
what
they value.
What they value, you know. So, but as soon as somebody shows gratitude to somebody else, they are then inclined to show gratitude, like in reciprocity, or about somebody, and on it goes, and on it goes, and on it goes. So it's mechanisms like that that allow you to make life easy, come up with interesting, different, relevant, memorable content. But just get through that barrier of being afraid to pick up the camera as well. And totally. I think you've got to accept that the first 6 to 10 videos that you create are just garbage, but you have to shoot them in order to get to the 11th, right?
Yes, it is the pancake theory of video. The first one always goes to the dog, right? It's never, you're letting the pan warm up, you're getting it right. It takes time. And honestly, that to the same extent, that's why I like recording videos remotely using tools like Riverside, which is what we're recording on now, but there's lots of other tools. I like recording people in their houses. I want to see what's in their background. I want to see what their environment is a little more. It's a lot more human than the usual fairly austere office backdrop that you see in a lot of kind of contrived, polished videos. For our last point, I want to get into something that is relatively new, not like hot, like this came in, but the last couple of years, I'll say 2 or 3 years, it's more than that. But over time, we started to see this preponderance, this over-focus on what I call micro videos, 30, 60-second videos. Sometimes they're on TikTok and YouTube. Sometimes they're literally embedded in the career sites. Sometimes they pop up. Sometimes they're just pop-ups. Sometimes they're just embedded. This kind of, sometimes it's a Q&A, sometimes it's just here's a testimonial, whatever. That and the tool sets around them, and there are many, many people who have great tool sets from that. How does that shape your thinking in terms of what is the content I should be building? Because now we've got all the standard distribution channels of YouTubes and TikToks and LinkedIn's and social and outreach and stuff like that. But now you have this internal distribution channel of, I have this video, how do I glue it to something where a candidate might be looking at a job and I want them to see this piece of content? How does that change your thinking about how to build content or what kind of stories should be told?
So if we go back to the age-old funnel, there needs to be content that is the hook that gets attention. There needs to be content that is purposely designed to deliver a message. But at some point in your journey, and if you map out the attribution of where you want to take your audience, it's never going to be linear. It'll be all over the place. It'll be lots of, But ultimately, if you have content that is what you consider to be the converter content, the one that tips somebody over the edge or gets them to take action, or, all roads should lead to Rome. And this is the bit where we go back to having a strategy. Like, is it gonna point people towards it, or is it gonna distract them and take them to a different place and all the rest of it? Making sure that all of this fits together in a loose, organic way, in some semblance of order that you can then start to track. Like, okay, all of this micro content in our social channels or peripheral pages on our career site is pointing people towards the content that really matters, that will qualify an audience such that if they watch it all, they are now a highly qualified candidate, or whatever you're trying to achieve, whatever success looks like. If you can be considered in that approach, then you're going to get a lot more out of your video strategy. And you've also got some sort of plan that you can measure and try and optimize and refine over time as well.
Yeah, because the different kinds of videos are there to achieve different outcomes, right?
Exactly.
The micro video that pops up when you're reading a job posting is not there to get you to fall in love with something, because if you got to the point that you're actually looking at job posting, a lot of that micro video is about objection overcoming. It's about kind of, how do I say, oh, this person's reading the job posting, maybe something's unclear, maybe they're kind of hedging their bets, maybe they're not sure they want to click that button and hit apply. The content is there to say, let me give you enough information or some more information to show that we are helpful, that we want you to feel comfortable, whatever that is. It's about kind of converting the person to an actual applicant, actual person who wants to show up to the interview. Some content is about getting attention, right? Taking people to lunch, that is pure attention getting. There's no call to action. There's no direct link of what to do next. The content is of itself interesting, and so people are paying attention to it and want to see what happens next. They're very different outcomes. There's lots of other things you could be considering, but when you're thinking about, whether it's big content versus little content, the channels, and the use cases are so specific, and mixing them up, just saying, oh, here's someone answered a really great question. I'm going to pick it up and stick it over here on TikTok. No, don't. You got to either give it a wrapper, you got to give it some header, you got to kind of serve it up in a way that says, this is what this is, and this is what we want you to learn from it. And each channel has different values. Like if I use TikTok or Instagram to say, now I'm going to drive people to hit the apply button, how? Nobody's getting off TikTok. Nobody's getting off Instagram. That's like saying, okay, I want you to put down the heroin and come over here and get a real job. No one's going to drop the heroin to go do the boring thing. If you can kind of feed them something interesting that puts in the seed in their head, and then when they're in the kind of mode of how do I make this thing happen, and then you give them the call to action, that's strategy at work. It's showing you how to use each piece to its maximum outcome.
Yeah, and I think we are now at a place of maturity with video and our content strategy where we can accept that we need to invest in content that doesn't have a direct call to action to apply for a job. Brand building and building awareness and sentiment and familiarity is a really important part of the puzzle, But ultimately, when you're producing video, there's only 4 things that video can do. It will either educate, entertain, inspire, or convince. So decide, and you can say, okay, we want to educate and entertain in this video. That's okay. Or we want to inspire and then convince in this video. That's fine. But you need to understand, what are we trying to do? And to your point, James, on the social media side of things, with 15 seconds of content, it might just be entertain and inspire. That's it. And they don't see your brand for another 24, 48 hours or 2 weeks or whatever it is. But when they do see a piece of content on LinkedIn or YouTube or somewhere else a little bit more considered, they're familiar with the brand, and they're going to give you a little bit more time because you've invested in the equity of building affinity and awareness.
Yeah, I think one day, I'm not going to put money on this, but I really want to see one day in the next year or two, some company goes so in on video and from that entertain, inform, excite, inspire kind of level. No call to action, no get it done, no convert, no convince. Just say something so interesting people want to have more, that they can put that content on YouTube and monetize it. Content so good, people will effectively pay for it. That's going to be the new bar. That is where things are going to head. And I don't know how long it's going to take us to get there. And it's probably a while, but it's a lofty goal. It's a big, tall bar, but I think it's real. And I think there are some really flippin' clever people in our industry, in our spaces. I look at Joel Alge, and I'm going to call on Joel. Hey, Joel, how you doing? His content is really funny and interesting for people who have looked for a job in their lives, which is effectively everybody. So it's got that universality. It's that feeling of frustration. And he also brings in what recruiters feel and all that. It's really interesting stuff. And he's not necessarily becoming a millionaire doing it, but he's got huge audience, huge following, huge visibility. People watch his videos, people click his content. That is inspirational to me. I think that if your employer brand is so interesting and saying such interesting things that people want to learn more and they would almost pay for the privilege, that's when you stuck it. And I would say that should be your North Star. That it's not about clicks, it's not about impressions. It's so good people would pay for it. Yeah, that's where I'd aim.
So I think you've hit upon something here, and I am desperate to see this happen as well. And I think it will happen in the next 48 months.
Yeah,
I think if you did a documentary on the inside track of a Nike or an Apple, it could feature on Netflix and people would watch it, and people would fall in love with that organization through osmosis and all the rest of it. And I don't know whether this is a very good example or not, but I'll throw it out there and you be the judge. But do you remember when Paramount Plus launched? Mm. They had a series, a limited series on there called The Offer. Do you remember that? So
yes.
It was about the making of Godfather.
Yep.
And how it came about. And it was such an interest. But obviously, it was in the studio of Paramount. So I fell in love with the Paramount studio, the Paramount lot, and all of the Paramount people and all the rest of it. And I just thought, what a really clever piece of content to start with, to launch Paramount Plus. It made them relevant and interesting and humanize the brand and all of that kind of stuff. And I just think we're definitely going to see more of that. And I also I might be going off on a tangent, so feel free to pull me back in.
Here?
What?
This is neither the time nor place, sir.
But I also think we're starting to see employee brand and talent acquisition converge with marketing. Budgets are starting to blur lines, and collaboration is certainly on the increase. And I think marketing is now going to cotton on to the fact that if you tell human stories about the people behind the brand, everybody wins, you know?
Yes,
and I think that warrants a bigger budget. That warrants a story arc of episodic content that people want to engage with more and more and more. And I think that formula's got everything. And as soon as a brand is brave enough to invest and say, well, look, instead of me giving you this $1 million budget to do all of these little tactical things, let's go all in on one thing. And let's do it. Let's see what happens. Let's get the PR headlines and let's chop that up and fill our social channels, for 12 months and see what happens. I think someone will do it and they will win big.
The more I think about it, the more I'm going to push back on your 48 months thing. I think it is actually sooner than that, because I'm thinking about, I hope so too, but I'm thinking about, you remember the Apple series of people working with Apple products. It happened just as COVID landed, and it seems like a big hubbub, like in the employer brand space, like, this is a great employer branding video. And I'm like, no, these people aren't working at Apple. These people are working with Apple products. It's not the same. But the line was so blurry, and people were so like, oh, like that reminds me that we are, in so many ways, that close to making that happen in so many different ways. Something's going to trip it. Something's going to move past the barrier and make that really happen. I think we are closer now that I think about it, because you're right. Telling stories inside the thing is just as good as telling stories of the thing. Talk about, when we tell these stories about, hey, what's it like to work here? They say what it's like to work here. Show it, be it, one thing I find interesting, you go on Glassdoor, somebody writes a good review and then somebody else goes, that was probably just someone from HR. That was probably just a recruiter. What, they don't work there? They don't count? They're not human beings having these same challenges as everybody else? Telling the recruiting story can feel very much snake eating its own tail unless you do it really interestingly. Talk about the challenge. Talk about what you're facing. The story of how you came up with your video strategy. Where's that video series? It's right there. Yeah,
and bringing this back to earth a little bit and forget the $1 million budgets and all the rest of it. Ideas cost nothing. They're not always easy to come up with great ideas, but it's worth really thinking about your strategy and come up with that great idea. And in the absence of a big budget, try and shoot it anyway, because if you tell an interesting story, it's an interesting story.
Absolutely. I think that is exactly the place we want to land. So to remind you, if you haven't heard us say this already, there's a lot of downloads, and this one is all about how to build a video strategy. It's brought to you by JobPixel, who sponsored the episode and the download. So thanks, JobPixel. Go to peoplemba.com to download it if it didn't come in the email, if you want to go learn more. We also have lots of downloads on how to write better outreach emails, how to build your personal brand, how to talk to the CFO, how to build an employer brand maturity model. So much content is coming to you. Predictions for 2025. We are building a library to help every TA leader get their seat at the table. Please take advantage. Please tell other people, because this is how we are shifting the entire industry. Bryan, any final thoughts, any final words on video either, or just in general? If I know you're punchy and you came off a flight mere minutes ago. This is why I ask. You're punchy. I know I'm going to get something good.
Well, do you know what? As always, you just said everything in the space of 15 seconds. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. That's a thing. Yeah, that's, But I will leave you with a visual lesson of just get started, regardless of the situation and all the rest of it. If this isn't a proof point that there's never a good time to shoot video, there's never, So let's just jump in, get started, but take a look at the strategy. There's some really good insights in there, and it might just be the comfort blanket needed to find the confidence to get started. And don't worry about the budget. Worry about being interesting and being purposeful with what you're trying to get out of your video, and just turn it on and start.
Just turn it on. I love it. All right, everybody. Thanks, Bryan. Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for getting off the plane and being game to record this video. Next week, we're talking about something, I love how we pivot these topics. They seem to swing in all crazy different directions. Next week, we're going to talk about how to better buy or make sense of HR and TA tech. I don't know how we go from video to that, but you're going to watch it happen. So tune in. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
See you next week.
A whole episode about video, and they wouldn't let me on camera. I know I'm just a series of ones and zeros, but I like to be seen too. Oh well, if this has inspired you, or even if you use it as an inexpensive sleeping aid, tell a friend about the podcast or point them to peoplemba.com. Toodles.